Okay, welcome back everyone. It is July 17 of 2015. We're going to continue with our look at the book of James, and we're going to take a look at chapter 4, and it deals with the Greek concept of Hedone. Hedone is an inward, egoistic passion to possess. So it's an egoism to its extreme. And he wants to address this problem because these teachers that are spread throughout the Greek cities are arguing and exhibiting a supreme egoism in competing for teaching positions and wanting to rule the community. So he begins by saying that you possess this inward nature of Hedone because you do covet and lust after this position of leadership. You want to hold it and possess it at all cost. So you are being extremely egoistic. And he said, outwardly this becomes evident as strife and quarreling and bickering between the members and the church. And this is the worst example possible. It is a missing of the mark spiritually. It is a missing of the mark because you don't petition God and you don't base your ministry on prayer. So you are not hitting the spiritual mark. And he goes on to say that they're actually associating with the carnal world, who uses cosmos, but it's cosmos as the carnal natural world, and they're forming an association or an actual friendship and fellowship with the carnal world. And he says this is resulting in a Hedone type misdirected petitioning and Hedone misdirected type egoistic exemplary nature and behavior within the congregation itself. And he says this creates a hostility toward God. This is not just hostility, this is alienation. You are alienating yourself, you're alienating your congregation, you're alienating the entire ministry of Didache teaching as being misaligned and not in a true alignment with the Spirit. So he says, you've become an alienated teacher, an alienated person, separated from the divine. And the only answer that he can give them is that the only way you can escape this Hedone type inward nature is through humility. You have to abandon and negate this egoism, and you have to humbly and in contrition seek God in prayer, seek the divine in prayer and meditation, and abandon this egoism. And so in the second moment he says, you possess this inward nature of envy and spite, longing after that which you want to possess. You long after that which you desire to possess in this bickering over the teaching and leadership position. He says, but outwardly there is the offer of grace, but it's an offer of grace to those who will be contrite and humble themselves toward the divine Spirit. And then there is the offering of grace from the divine. So he concludes and he says, resist evil and submit to God. And evil here is resist diabolos. And diabolos is slander. So what he's saying resist diabolos, resist slander, resist confusion from slander, resist diabolos, and subject yourself to God. So it's resist evil, but it's a very specific kind of evil. It's the slandering and the backbiting and the atmosphere of confusion that has been created because of their Hedone inward nature. And then he kind of falls back to chapter 1 and he brings up that concept of Di-Psuche. He says your inward nature has become Di-Psuche, double-minded or two-souled. I mean, literally it means two-souled. You've become a soul of Hedone, egoism, and a soul of Pneuma, spirit. So you're two-souled, you're double-minded, you're Hedone and Pneuma. And you're supposed to be centered on the Pneuma spirit, but here you are split between Pneuma and Hedone. But he says God does offer spiritual cleansing to those who will humble themselves. So he says, therefore humble yourself, receive the cleansing exaltation of the Spirit. Seek God in humility. And then he concludes this second moment by saying that their inward heart of Hedone is a nature that actually practices a false kind of judging, because they're slandering each other. They're making false judgment based on the carnal world and the carnal atmosphere. And so this Hedone nature has resulted in false judging of each other and accusations and slandering, and they become non-doers of the law. So they're trying to teach the new covenant, and yet they're actually becoming anti-covenant. They're actually being totally misaligned and alienated from God's covenant. And James says there's only one true judgment, and that comes from the God who can save and destroy. That's the only judgment that really exists. So your slandering and your false judgment cannot hold up to the one true judgment. God is the lawgiver who gave the law and the covenant of the law, and God possesses the dunamai, or the dunamis power, and dunamis is the power of potentiality. So potentially God is all-powerful. Energia is actualized power, but dunamis is potential power. But God is the dunamis, true judge, and he can sozo heal, or he can olethras, cut off completely. So he can judge and completely separate you from and alienate you, or he can offer that cleansing and heal you. So through humility, seek that sozo healing of spiritual cleansing, that katharizo, and negate and abandon that Hedone nature that is splitting you into two separate psyche souls. So he says, realize your vulnerability, that you are a vapor. You are finite. You are not anything but a finite human being with a very limited capacity with your fallen nature. And eventually all of the finite world will pass away. Sarks will deteriorate and become unseen. You are an atomis vapor. You are a vapor here for such a brief time. So humble yourselves before the one true Krinos judge, the Krinos Theos, the Lord God as judge. Humble yourself before him, and then be healed and cleansed of that Di-Psuche double-mindedness, and don't exist in a Hedone nature coupled with a Pneuma nature, but make it spirit only. Center your life on the Pneuma spirit, and abandon and negate this Hedone egoism toward possession, lustful possession. And he concludes with his generic statement for the whole generic concept of threskia, the idea of practical worship. He concludes chapter 4 by saying that knowing without doing, or faith without works, is dead. And that's his conclusion in 4. If you already have been blessed with the knowing of the good, if you've already been given the spiritual gift of perception, and really truly do understand spiritual nobility and the divine trajectory of God's teleology of salvation, but then you don't do it, and you fall into this Hedone nature, this Hedone lustful egoism, with a prideful arrogance and a public display of empty boasting, and causing confusion and painful troubling within your congregation. In other words, they're not doing the works. So if you've got the faith of knowing, but you're not exhibiting the works of being in true alignment with the kingdom, then he concludes and he says, then you miss the mark. You, hamartia, sin, you miss the mark. Hamartia is literally, in the Greek, missing the mark of being aligned with the kingdom. You, faith without works, is dead, or faith without works misses the mark, is a better way to translate it. So faith without works is dead. So you need to realign yourselves, because you proclaim to have the faith, you proclaim to know, you proclaim to be a teacher who possesses knowing, and yet you have a Hedone nature of inward egoistic possessiveness and lustful possessive type nature. Then you are Di-Psuche, you are two-souled, you are double-minded, and that is destructive. You are destroying your congregation, and you are becoming not a teacher, but you're becoming a false judge. You're becoming a false, critical, destructive diabolos slanderer. So negate this diabolos slandering, negate this Hedone nature, and reaffirm Pneuma spirit, and practice what you teach. Become a faith with works, because faith without the doing misses the mark as hamartia sin. So it gives us a very brief, but almost another kind of generic thematic presentation of the entire letter, because he really does concentrate on the fact that this assimilation into the Greek culture as Hedone is splitting their lives apart into becoming two-souled, and it's destroying the teaching ministry. And that'll wrap up 4. We'll pick up chapter